Kokina semdol kake mofaseda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I'm Matterall. With me is Carneros.
Good morning, Carneros. Good morning, Matterall. I'm Carneros.
What do we got today?
We have actually a great show today lined up. We're going to be talking about the February content patch, and we've got three wonderful guests with us. Let me take a moment and introduce them. How's that sound?
Yeah.
First of all, on camera with us, let me introduce you to Colby Bosh'tet. He is from Great White Hunters Corporation in Feasting Frenzy, and they live in Wormholes. And then next to him, also on camera, and not living in a wormhole, is CCP Rise, our esteemed guest. Yes, you heard that right, from CCP Games. You guys all know him. You probably recognize his face.
Hello,
and
nice to be back.
Yay! And then off camera, you can't see him, but chiming in with us is Loroseco Cross from Hard Knocks, also living in wormholes. You'll sense a theme. Loro, let us hear your voice, sir.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Very nice. Colby, let us hear your voice, sir.
How you doing? Thanks for having me as well.
Well,
Fantastic.
Nobody will get them confused. They sound completely different from one another. That's good.
Yeah, the accents.
That's right. You're Australian, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
A lot of people have confused the theme of Great White Hunters. The Great White Shark. If anyone's ever been in our wormhole and they see all of our structures, they're all named after the open ocean sharks and all that great stuff.
I love a great theme. We named, speaking of a great theme, we named this show To Wormholes with Love. And we're going to talk about some of that. Shall we jump in a little bit and talk about, if you guys were not paying attention, the February content patch came out this past week. Very exciting. I think, didn't CCP name it From Wormholes with Love too?
Yeah, we did.
So. Yeah. So there were a few changes that were included in it. One is Guardians Gala came out and it's going to run February 13th through 24th. If you remember it from last year, they were, a wonderful series of PvE encounters that were temporary in nature, and they dropped, I remember it because they dropped pink ship skins and colorful ship skins. Have they changed from last year to this year? I haven't run one yet.
The actual sites or the skins?
The sites, the Guardians Gala sites.
I'd actually have a bone to pick because I couldn't find them. It pops up when you first get into the game, and then if you dismiss that screen, you can't get the screen back. And it's not on the agency.
The trick is get in a PvP fleet and ride around, and you'll see them pop up around in space in places, and when you can't get to them. And then when you get done with the PvP fleet, hopefully you have written down where all of them were so you can jump back in and go zoom over and run them. That's my experience, is you see them all while you're flying around and can't get to them because you're busy.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll finish with what's on the menu here, and then what else is there?
And are the Guardians Gala sites running in wormholes, by the way?
Yeah, that's mostly where they are, right?
All right, I've seen them in nullsec too. Another change that came with the content patch is a temporary increased loot drops from PvP. And these are a lot of exciting. We've seen CCP change the loot drop mechanics once, and I think it was for a week, might have been 2 weeks. They set loot drops to 100%, meaning if you blew up a ship or a structure, absolutely everything dropped, everything equipped, everything in the cargo hold. That was a lot of fun while it happened. This time, the percentage drop is not 100%. Are you willing to tell us what the percentage change is? Do you know?
No, we didn't put that in the announcement. It's really high. It's almost 100%. I thought we'd published what the number was, but I don't want to say a number in case we didn't. But it's super high. We just wanted to get away from with 100%, you get all the silly killboard padding stuff. And although that was funny once, it's probably better to make sure there's still at least some loss when things are destroyed so that people don't do that. So it's just very high, but not quite 100.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's what I would have done. Put a margin in there for the people playing with killboards. There was also a sale running on popular ship skins for Wormhole ships. So 25% off, I hear. If you are not aware of Wormholes, if you're a new player or something, I will point out that Wormholers tend to be fairly wealthy, and they fly some nice ships when they PvP. So it can be a lot of fun to see what they're out flying. Do our guests have any comments on the ship skins and Wormhole ships?
Yeah, we can talk about them a little bit later when we talk about Guardian's Gala, but there's something about Guardian's Gala that's special to me, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. Might be the pink skins, I don't know.
And then there was also a UI change with a famous red dot. I don't know if you've logged into EVE and seen the red dot, but it's a very popular subject of discussion at the moment in the EVE community. It's supposed to let you know when something new or something has changed in your UI or some new item has been added to your cargo. It's probably being slightly overused at the moment, but maybe it'll be tuned as we go.
Yeah, I don't want to try and go too deep on the red dot because it's not my stuff. But I can say there's the people I see in TIS chat asking like why, and why is pretty straightforward. It's actually really common that new people coming in lose track of things. EVE's inventory is not the simplest, and so helping with that is a very clear why. But it's possible it's kind of overreached a little and will need some tuning, as you say. So I don't know what the exact plans are because, like I said, it's not my team, but I assume there's some conversation going on about how to adjust it.
Yeah, I believe the question we got was, does it trigger you like it triggers the players?
I mean,
because they're like cats to this red dot. They're all over it. We had to stop a red dot rebellion. Yeah. Anyway, just kidding.
It just needs a UI thing you can turn it on and off even.
Yeah. I mean, I know most of us that have been playing for a bit don't lose track of our items, and maybe there's still a reason to have some version of it to make you feel good when you loot stuff, but it would need to be probably not quite as persistent and not quite as loud, but we'll see. I'm sure they'll take a look, make some changes at some point.
All right.
I'm enjoying the time on Reddit right now, though. I kind of am glad that it got put in just so that we could have this like completely overwhelming meme spam about red dots.
So totally. So we should have at FanFest people bringing red dots so they can put them everywhere.
I was thinking like bringing just a stack of stickers, like red dot stickers, would probably be a pretty solid move for FanFest. Put them on everybody that comes in the door.
All right. Should we get into these patch notes?
Go for it.
All right.
Before we dig into this, let me give a little preface for my involvement. One thing that's really cool that we're doing now, I think we're getting slowly better and better at it. Not perfect still, but this release was the Wormhole part of it, at least, has kind of system changes from Talos, which is what I'm involved in, has the Guardian's Gala event and the added loot drop and stuff coming from Team Raw. I don't know if you guys have heard about them yet, but it's like a new iteration of the events team, basically. And then a lot of kind of amplification from publishing, and that's where like the skin sales come from and some of the news items and stuff like that. So I can speak like better to the system changes that are coming from Talos, but we're in general pretty excited about these kind of cross-team thematic releases, and hopefully we'll be doing more and more of this and getting better and better at it. But just gonna throw that out there. So I'm gonna be better able to talk about the system stuff than about the Guardian Scala stuff, but it's all tied together, which is awesome. So
yeah, well, that's what my first impression of this patch was when I started going through it. So we went through it live on Today and EVE Online, which we do like every morning. Was, whoa, this thing keeps going and going. This is a big consequential change after big consequential change. It's a big patch.
Yeah, I feel like somehow we just did a kind of a reorg to the way the team structure works internally, and we've also done a lot of kind of standard New Year's, like looking at what we're trying to do. And I think our velocity has just picked up a lot. Like we're just putting a lot more into the game in general. And I think also the fact that it's coming in these themed kind of cross team releases makes it feel even bigger. So it's pretty exciting. I feel like I don't know, it seems right now it feels powerful internally, like we're able to make a lot of change at a much faster pace than we were doing for a lot of the last couple of years. So it's very exciting. I hope we can get a lot of good stuff done with the added pace.
Yeah, this is there's a lot to go through, so let's just start in right here with the thing that you worked on as part of Talos team. You guys are in charge of balancing the game, making it competitive for players that have been around a long time. And one of the areas that seemed to be have a little too much safety associated with the amount of wealth that could be generated in it was wormholes. Do you want to talk about the wormhole changes and what some of the goals might have been?
Sure. I think the primary goal, there's a couple, like you said. One of the big ones is just start addressing some of the biggest risk-reward issues. Aster who's farming is the most obvious example where, the safety from which you could farm really big amounts of money was a little out of control, and we want to try and keep that healthy when we can. And you'll see now sort of broadly a lot of deep work on what's going on with income, resource distribution, risk reward, whatever. So that all matches up really well with that sort of big strategic objective for the project. And then the other big side for Talos was that out of a lot of really awesome discussion, Exuki did an amazing job with the CSM doing, he did this survey to over 1,000 Wormhole residents talking about what they're missing and what they're looking for. And then we combine that with, we have like an internal Wormhole resident group who also gave us a lot of feedback, and kind of from all over the place, the best objective we could find to start on with this release was just trying to increase connectivity. I think there's a desire for better access to content. Basically, people want to fight without it always being arranged or without it always being because of some big eviction. They want to be able to more quickly have the chance of chaining into some kind of content. And the combination of the safety available on the PvE side because of drawbridging, Aster who's farming, MJDing, like all these things, keeping people really safe, plus just the amount of work it takes to find other people are both barriers. And so we just want to start trying to remove those barriers and see where we end up. And so the biggest thing Talos did here was just increasing the number of wandering connections by a lot. In fact, I just discovered we made a little oopsie and increased them more than we intended, but the intention was to increase connectivity through wandering spawns pretty substantially and see what that did. We don't know for sure if that is going to be a good thing, but the hypothesis at least is that if people can more easily connect to other people, there'll be more content, which will be more fun for everybody living there. So that's kind of the goal. And yeah.
Well, we have with us a couple of Wormhole guys. One is Loroseco. He's HK, which is kind of higher end gameplay, let's say. And then we also have a new guy, Colby, with us. And he's from a group that's up and coming. So we have different angles on the wormhole changes, how people might be adjusting to them. So guys, welcome. Can any of you talk about, including Rise, like those were the design goals and how are people reacting to those changes already?
Shall I start with the wandering connections then?
Sure.
I think a lot of what I'm going to say today is probably moot because you've just said that you've gone a little overboard with the amount of roaming. But if I had to ask people to sum up how they felt in one word, it would be overwhelmed right now. The sheer amount of wormholes. I asked my corp if they wanted me to give anything to you in order to discuss during the show, and somebody's linked me a picture of a C6 wormhole with 12 connections varying between C5s and C6s off it, and this is fairly typical for us nowadays. One of the things our corp's been complaining about, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we're going to have to rethink how we scan chains and how we bookmark chains, because the volume of connections is so huge that we're running into circles a lot more often in chains, which is where you get to the same wormhole with two different routes. And most wormhole corps have a bookmarking scheme where it's very easy to work out which route you take to get home. And when there's very regularly more than one route home, you end up in a situation where bookmarking schemes don't make sense. And navigation is a lot more confusing than it used to be. I think everyone is on the same page where more connectivity is a good thing. We would rather have these shorter, wider wormhole chains where you can get everywhere faster rather than the longer, deeper, everything is 10 jumps away like it used to be. But it is definitely too much here. So I'm curious, once you've tweaked the mistakes that you say you've spotted, I'm curious how far that's going to reel it back. Because we discussed before the show that the connectivity to C6 space is far too high. And you've said that's going to be adjusted. Even the connectivity between C5 wormholes seems to be very high right now, because more connectivity is good, but a lot of these systems tend to be quite empty. A lot of them tend to be PvE holes that don't have that much content.
Yeah, so I'm curious too where it'll be after this adjustment, because we deliberately were pretty generous with the amount of connections we were trying to add, and then Fat Finger added much more even than that. but even after fixing that, it's still going to be a really substantial increase. Basically, we did. I don't know how much exactly you guys know about how the distributions work, but for the old wandering distributions, the ones that were there going into this set of changes, we pretty much doubled the presence of like all wanderings, and then also added all the new wanderings in high class that go C4 to C5, C4 to C6, C5 to, and those added distributions are pretty frequent as well. And the point was to deliberately try and test, if, as you say, added connectivity is good, shorter, fatter chains is good. We just wanted to make sure we added enough that it was possible to evaluate that hypothesis basically afterwards. And then, if it turns out it's good, but maybe it's a little too high, then we can come back down to some middle ground. But yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. I was looking today just at some of the stats since the release went out, and for now, there's definitely increased movement, but there's not a big increase in PvP from what I can tell, in just like a kind of pretty simple glance at what like metrics for wormhole space. There's some signs though that people are moving around more. So we'll have to see, and we'll definitely have to see after we fix the C5 to C6 connections.
I like that. So is it CCP Fat Finger? Is that the new?
That should be my dev name. Yeah. You're good.
I think while we're still on roaming connections, it's important to. I don't think we've never really stated. I've never really said this to Exuki as well, so it's probably not got onto you guys how important for content even high set connections are for us. Because obviously finding content isn't guaranteed in space. So if we roll into a target and say there's timers that have 24 hours left, we'll leave a scout, and then the next day we'll scan out the target and scan out our own chain. And we have to find high set connections in both targets to find ourselves a route and to get there in less than 20 jumps tends to be our objective.
That's interesting. We definitely didn't do anything with high set connections in this past patch, and we kind of deliberately tried to keep the Empire connections. Like we I don't know, specifically didn't want to mess with them very much because, I know a little while back we nerfed null connections pretty substantially because of null just using wormholes as a highway and force projection, blah, blah, blah. So we increased null connections slightly, but tried to mostly leave that alone. But that's an interesting angle that maybe...
I'm aware you guys haven't touched HiSex, and just actually sitting down and doing the stats, that seems to be the case. But a lot of our people think you have, because it's just more effort to break out of the... We don't call it the C5 highway anymore. You've turned it into the C5 web. To get out of that C5 web into low class, that's where you find all the K spaces. And once you get into low class, because of all of the other wandering connections you've buffed, low class is this whole other web with a bunch of high sex and low sex, and that's fantastic. Honestly, I love the increase from the low class wormholes, but it's a lot more effort now as a scanner to get into that from high class, because there's just, that's a C5, that's a C6, that's another C6. But hopefully we'll see what happens once you...
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Yeah.
It still may be the case that we end up with something more like a web, and we need to turn down the presence a little bit on all of those new added high class to high class to make it, there's probably a balance there where your ability to connect to other people feels pretty good, but you still don't have this like looping web everywhere. But we'll just have to see how much different it feels once that one over distributed one is changed. So
that's really interesting. What you're saying is that because there's a lot more connections between wormholes among each other, that added confusion or number makes it harder to break out of wormholes into known space.
Well, especially because the added connections, a lot of the added connections we put in this patch are just high class to high class. So most of what you're finding is going to connect you to another high class system, and it's just a lot more scanning, right, Loro, until you're going to find your way out of those high class connections.
Before the patch, maybe you'd find a wormhole with 4 signatures in it. One of those signatures would be the wormhole that you came in from, and then one of them would be the static, and it would be, say, 2 gas sites. Now that wormhole is 8 to 12 signatures, and if you're looking for a high sec, a lot of those new signatures are just going to be wormholes that are going to be alternate routes. So maybe you can find more high sex out of those wormholes, but it's just a lot more scanning per system. And that is a positive, actually, that's worth mentioning. A lot of the times we'd be in a situation where we're scanning out a hostile wormhole and we don't have a chance to roll the wormhole if we don't find a good chain, if we hit a dead end and all of the connections are crit. That's not really going to happen anymore. There's so many roaming connections that there's a lot of options to find high sex. So that's at least one benefit from the amount of roamings that we're seeing.
Yeah, I like that side effect. That's pretty cool. Like, known space becomes a little safer from wormhole space, incidentally. But I thought the latest hotness was living in a C2 wormhole and then just going into C5s and the higher end wormholes.
So C2s, as far as wormhole connectivity goes, the people who live in those C2, C5 nullsec wormholes, they have the same C5 static that most PvP corps have. Most PvP corps, besides the C2 guys, they're either in a 5-5, like Hard Knocks are, which is a C5 wormhole with a C5 static, or they'll be in C4 wormholes with a C5 static and then another static, or something along those lines. So they're having the same sort of connectivity advantages and disadvantages as we're having through their C5 static. But the C2 guys also have their nullsec static that they can roll for new content, and nothing's changed as far as the nullsec static is concerned. So those guys are still finding the same content, still getting the same amount of nullsec content as they were before.
Yikes.
We've sort of found the opposite. So we're a 5-5 as well, but we've found that we get nullsecs every other day. We've had high secs every other day as well. We've currently got a high sec right now. We're getting high secs every other day. So my guys were curious if the high sec was increased, but obviously it's not.
Sorry, just to clarify, do you mean high secs connected directly to your home, or do you mean in your chain?
Directly to our C5.
Okay.
And we get null secs. We've had null secs, particularly since the update. We've got them almost every single day. We're getting a null sec capital hole straight directly to us. And in terms of the web and that with the C4s, like obviously same as you guys, you get those C4s, you're logging after downtime and you've got 3 connected to you and whatever, those new C4 roamings. But that's what I was saying to Matterall earlier, was that these connections, we're getting these C4 connections, and instead of C5 to 5 or C5 to 6, and that we're getting to a C4 which has got 2 extra connections, which generally speaking a K-space most of the time will be within 2 jumps of it anyway, because
It's interesting how the RNG
5-3, 5-2, 4, 4-2. A lot of C4s have got C1, 3 connections and that sort of stuff. So
I mean, it's so funny with our big RNG systems where you can't see everything that's happening. Like, you can't see the whole distribution across all the systems. You can only see yours, and it's really RNG. It's like really hard not to draw conclusions based on whatever RNG thing happens. My favorite example of this is the Abyss loot. People are constantly thinking that we've changed the Abyss loot like tables of distribution because it's really RNG, and they'll go a couple days where they find a whole bunch of whatever specialization skill books or a whole bunch of nothing and think that we've changed it, and it's like literally never changed since really.
It's awesome. So RNG is random number generation. It's randomness in the system, basically.
Yeah.
From what I could tell, though, the wormhole to null-sec connections are still functioning fine. I had an occasion yesterday where a new corp just came to join the Bastion. It was the first, they've been in a war zone, so it was the first time that the guys felt like, oh, I can take out a Nyx now and rat. So the guy takes out his Nyx and rats, and a local neutral spots him, reaches out to Volta. Volta forms up with some friends and starts rolling holes to get a connection to Fountain. And they find one, and they manage to get an artillery fit Loki fleet through a wormhole and catch the Nyx before he wises up and safes up. So they are still able to roll a hole if they want to and get a null-sec destination.
So there's I'll clarify for the sake of viewers as well.
Go ahead,
there are static null-sec connections and there are roaming null-sec connections. The static null collections are the ones that the C2 null-sec dudes would be using, where they're rolling one null-sec and then another one immediately spawns. And those are the same connections that Volta use in Thera. Thera has, I want to say, 4 null-sec static wormholes. It might be more, it might be less. And they will roll and spawn new ones. And if they have enough people, they can roll all 4 of them at the same time until they get a close null-sec to wherever they want to go. What CCP have touched on is the roaming null-sec connections, which, if people know wormhole code, it's the Z142 wormholes that they've been playing with, which just sort of randomly spawn around C5 space. And if you roll one, you don't get a new one. So if you want to find roaming connections, so if you're in Hard Knocks and you want to find a specific null-sec system, you can't roll null-sec wormholes. You have to either scan out a C5 chain looking for the roaming null-sec connections, or you have to rage roll your C5 static and then scan out that C5 looking for the null-sec connections. So it is a slightly different circumstance there between what groups like Hard Knocks do and what groups like Volta or Inner Hell do.
Nice. Write that down, Metal. Z124.
Yeah.
That'll be a test.
Right now, I'm just thinking Wormhole guys can never say we don't do anything for them, because this show is like filled with inside Wormhole information and stuff. So we'll break out a glossary at the beginning of the show for people who want to keep up with all the terms that are being thrown around. I don't know how you do it, Rise. Like, I would be in way over my head trying to conceptualize this stuff.
It's been actually a really fun crash course. I'm not the most wormhole literate, or wasn't the most wormhole literate person. I mean, I've had like I've used wormholes some, but I am definitely not an expert, and it's been pretty fun learning about. I mean, it's such a unique ecosystem. It's like a whole world that's separate in so many ways from the way normal people play EVE, and it's really complicated. And I don't know. It's cool though, and
Yeah.
I'm catching up.
Yeah, me too. But this to me looks like you essentially created, I'm going to say it, blackout inside of Wormhole space is kind of contained in there, because now people who are trying to rat are under a lot more pressure. There's so many different avenues to get to them.
I mean, there is more pressure, but actually the blackout, since you bring it up, is a whole nother set of wormhole stuff that I think deserves a lot of investigation that we decided not to mess with in this patch. The fact that new SIGs show up instantly on Probe Scanner, so you're alerted almost immediately when anyone comes into your system or when they could come into your system. And drawbridging, the fact that your K162s don't spawn, so you can basically lock yourself off. All of this sort of intel and access-based stuff around farming in Wormholes is something that probably also needs looking at and updating, but all of it is kind of, I don't know, even more, both more complicated technically for us to work on, and I think from a design point of view, carry some of the same potential downside as Blackout, where it's hard to figure out. Like, tuning risk reward is pretty high stakes, because if you make it too scary, no one can do anything, and if you like right now, it's probably further the other way where it's too safe, but it's pretty tough. So we save that for a later update, but there's definitely more work to do.
I can clarify there that I used the Blackout analogy when I was on the show with Matterall a few days ago, and that was in reference to the huge amount of C6 roaming connections. So if they're getting tweaked way down, then the Blackout analogy will probably not be probably be good on that front.
I mean, that's actually, though, since you can tell me, would you say that just having a high number of connections is enough pressure, even though people can, in most cases, I mean, I guess you're not going to be able to get like dreads out of a site, but just the fact that there's connections into you is enough to keep you from wanting to run sites?
So if I will not run sites if there is even a single wormhole connected to my C6. I will roll every single one. That's how everyone does it, because you don't want to leave scouts because you could stop paying attention for a couple of minutes and somebody sneaks past. So I spend the first 20 minutes of my setting up for PvE rolling every single connection to my C6. If there's so many incoming connections that I keep getting new ones spawn as I'm rolling them, I'm just going to give up. A couple of times, even before this patch, I would be watching someone that I wanted to kill, and they roll 8 wormholes off because that's how many are connected to them, and then they just log off and they don't PvE because they've just spent however long rolling a bunch of wormholes and they can't be bothered to actually PvE. That's actually a little bit more common than people might think.
I mean, that's such a wild situation. If just the fact that someone can come into your system is too much risk for you to PvE, like, where do we go from there?
It's how every single wormhole PvE group works. That's just sort of the system that's set up. My C6 PvE setup is worth nearly 20 billion ISK. I'm not gonna. I can't really afford to replace it particularly often. I can maybe afford to replace it once.
It's like their version of Rorquals, I guess.
It's sort of that, yeah.
I mean, more expensive though.
Yeah, but
sounds like.
So for every Rorqual pilot, go ahead, Colby.
C6 base is the wealth of, well, Hard Knocks and all those big groups. I mean, if you hurt C6 base, you'll hurt the wealth of all the big groups, because I know Hard Knocks protect C6 base like anything, and I know Laserhawks do too. I know if you try to move into a C2 with a nullsec C6 and you plan on hunting C6 base, you will be evicted very, very quickly. And I know that for a fact, because I was like, we're friends with Novak, no vacancies and that, and that sort of stuff. So and we have good relationships with all these groups. But and like I own a C6 myself, so like I know what it's all about and that sort of stuff. But that's where the main wealth of wormhole space comes from, is C6 space right there, and 99% of it is owned by Hard Knocks, Laserhawks, and some Inner Hell.
So for the record, firstly, Hard Knocks, Laserhawks, and their allies own less than 40% of C6 space. You can go and rage roll C6s and look that up for yourself if you want. And secondly, according to Exuki's survey that he did, that CCP Rise mentioned earlier in the show, over 70% of people in wormhole space use C5s for their ratting, which is all
totally true. Yeah,
which
absolutely.
Is all
every average group.
Yeah, which is not. It's less profitable in ISK per hour than C6s, but only because in C6s people are putting 3 or 4 dreadnoughts on field. If you put 3 dreadnoughts on field in a C5, it is just as profitable. It's a little bit less, admittedly, but it is basically just as profitable.
About 600 mil per 15 minutes, approximately.
Yeah, which is exactly the same as in C6 space. We make about 600 to 800 mil per 15 minutes in sites in C6 space. If people think that C5s are less profitable because they are hampering themselves because they're too scared to put dreadnoughts on field, which is why we're getting onto it later with drifters. The drifter AI changes. They can no longer warp to planets, which means finally, after 4 years, you can't PvE using a structure.
Which is amazing, yeah.
It's fantastic, and now people are actually going to have to put dreadnoughts on field, and it's a bit riskier for them, but they're going to be in a situation where they're going to be making more ISK per hour because they're putting dreadnoughts on the field, and they'll think, hey, this is actually a little bit better than my old rattlesnake farming.
So, okay, that puts us into one of the things that we wanted to talk about too, the Astor House changes, the drifter changes, right? The drifters used to be tricked. I'm sorry, maybe you could explain this better than I could, either Loroseco or Rise.
I can give it a go. So drifters, the drifter was the final boss in a Wormhole PvE site in C5 and C6 space. And if you didn't tackle it in the site, if you just spawned it and then warped away, it would warp around the system between planets and wormholes. And what you could do is you could anchor an Astor House on a planet and set up a mobile warp disruption bubble on the planet 0 warp in, and the drifters would get caught. And then after a few hours or a few days, you would bait all of the drifters up to your Astor House, and they would all aggress on the Astor House, and then you could kill them with the Astra in 100% safety. If somebody rolled into you while you were doing this, your worst case was you were going to lose a bit of loot from the drifter, and maybe whatever frigate you were using to tackle the drifters, a Griffin or a Bantam or whatever people used for this. The biggest change that's happened to drifters with this most recent patch is they no longer warp to planets. They'll only warp to wormholes, which means that there is no set place where a drifter is going to spawn, so there's no way you can anchor an Astor House to be guaranteed to be on grid with them, and you can no longer use this method to kill them. If you want to kill drifters, you're going to either need to commit a sizable subcap force to the field, or dreadnoughts, or you're going to have to put a couple of rattlesnakes on field and sit there for literally, I have no idea how long it would take, 50 minutes to an hour to kill them with a couple of subcaps, because they have a lot of EHP. So you're either putting dreads on the field or you're taking a huge cut in ISK per hour, which is fantastic.
And something's always tackled too, which is obviously...
Well, unfortunately, it's not always tackled, and that is worth mentioning here. I have a screenshot here that I'm going to put in podcast, and somebody can link it in the stream.
Oh, fantastic. Those help.
This screenshot is one of the most common sites in Wormhole space in the last few days, and that's because the sleepers in Wormhole sites are meant to warp scramble you to prevent you from micro-jumping to safety.
Hold on, Loroseco. I'm going to stop you for just a second while we get that up on screen, because so people can visualize it while you describe it. I want to just kind of clarify what we've seen. Essentially, for people who don't understand Wormhole stuff, what I understand is that drifters were easily manipulatable. Is that a word?
Yeah, they were easily baited onto Astor Houses, yeah.
Right, and so that has now stopped, which means now you actually have to fight them, and these things are pretty heavy duty, especially in Wormholes, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, we have that screenshot up, so go ahead and talk about it.
So there's been another change where sleepers, the NPCs in Wormhole sites, also warp scramble, because beforehand, if somebody rolled into you, you could just hit your micro jump drives and get away to safety, and nobody would be able to catch you. But now they warp scramble, which means in theory you should be locked down to the grid. However, mobile micro jump units, you can still use them while you're being sleeper scrammed, and you can also still be boosted using command destroyers. So I'm assuming this is unintended and is a
we'll be looking at that soon.
Okay, so and it is worth mentioning that the drifter, which is the final boss, and the sleeper, which is the NPC, they seem to use slightly different warp scramblers. So the final boss, drifter, before this patch, it did show a warp scramble effect, but it didn't actually stop you from micro jump driving. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether they do still let you micro jump drive, or whether that's been changed along with the normal NPCs. If that makes sense.
All right. I don't know what we do with that, actually. Do you want to put that in a bug report or something?
I think there's been quite a few bug reports and YouTube videos, and
so you're gonna so that brings up a good question, though. You put out this patch, Rise. It's definitely a bold step forward, settling some of the stuff. I'm sure the CSM Wormhole member Exuki had a lot of input on a lot of this stuff. And are you guys going to be iterating on this?
I mean, yeah, we're at least following up with the stuff that is right now sitting not working as intended, whether it's the scrams or the connection frequency. So we'll follow up right away on that stuff. But then I hope we can keep coming back to tweak. The idea for Talos is to be able to just regularly make iterative changes so that all over the game we're able to tune and try new things. And there's a lot of balls in the air. I mean, we have capitals to keep working on, we have structure stuff to keep working on, and we want to keep also hitting the smaller groups or more niche things like Wormholes, faction warfare, or whatever. And I think we can do all of it, but we'll just have to see. I kind of wanted to comment for 1 second. There was a kind of cool discussion going on in chat actually during this about what sort of risk reward tolerance we should expect for PvE, which I think is a really interesting question that we're finding out a lot about between Blackout and these changes to capital balance, like Sino changes as well. I think we're finding that at least for now, in a lot of cases, the expectation is pretty high safety. I think the chance of dying normally as a ratter, even in something like just a cheap subcap, is really low, and that's kind of an operating expectation that gets even more true when you get up to really big ships. And people kind of idealize or would hope that there'd be, I think when they think of the appropriate risk for really high amounts of income, they think of pretty high risk, like that there's a pretty strong chance you get caught or that there's a lot of danger associated with what you're doing. But I think what we're discovering is that either because of just the way the economics looks or the feel of it, just the experience as a player, very much real danger is not easy to tolerate, even for pretty high amounts of income, and people will just stop doing things. And I think we need to do a lot more exploring around this, but it may be that the increasing risk needs to be really small amounts of increased risk so that people will keep doing stuff, but the death rate goes up just a little bit, rather than pushing it so far to the other end that people just can't, like Laura was saying, just have to stop using their C6s. And I hope we just can keep trying things. I think we're finding out a lot right now about what that trade-off looks like, that we maybe were, we haven't played that much in the last few years. And I think we're finding out now that it's a very sensitive dial. And so I hope we just get to keep tweaking and looking for good balance. And the other, what Omeka's proposing here is that people need to change their expectations about that threshold and actually set up with the assumption that they're going to get killed more often, and the ones who do will end up being the ones who are able to keep farming. But
well, it seems like it's you're talking about psychology. You're having to deal with psychology of how people behave against risk.
Yeah, I will say for the record, as somebody who doesn't accept a lot of risk in their highest PvE setup, I would accept more risk if I enjoyed the PvE. I hate PvE with a passion. I really despise it. I do it because it's a necessity. If that experience has never been enjoyable for me, I just want to get out there and I want to shoot things. It's very much a means to an end for me.
Yeah,
it's a barrier for me.
And I think we have one of the highest risk, I think the actual highest risk in terms of death rate for PvE that we have is Abyss, which actually stays pretty popular despite that, both because the income justifies it, but also because it's more fun. So people will put up with a little more work and risk. It's crazy though, like Abyss, people think of Abyss as like really dangerous. And if you look at the kill board, there's spam stuff dying in there all the time, but still I think the success rate in C5s for people that actually, or not C5s, tier 5 Abysses for people that run them regularly is still like 96% or something. Like something with a 4% risk rate is still considered extremely dangerous relative to a lot of other PvE, which is, I think, an indication of how risk averse people are with PvE.
Yeah, one thing as well that you're talking about bugs with the drifter bosses. I was running some sites with my dreads the other day, and the drifter boss, as soon as it was spawned, it warped off instantly, which isn't something that has ever happened. And not only that, I had to combat scan it to find it, and it was on a K162 that had not actually spawned yet. It didn't exist. But when I walked to the wormhole and everything, it was obviously there, and the drifter was there, but there was no other way to find it. And that wormhole was meant to be spawned from the nullsec side. It was a nullsec. It was meant to be spawned from the nullsec side, but it ended up spawning after I plus through it, but it was a K162 that I should never have technically found.
Yeah. We messed with that guy's brain a little bit and weren't sure exactly what all was going to happen, so we can I don't know if if things are broken, if he's acting really weird, we can go and mess with his brain more. But
this is that was happening before the changes, but it's kind of it's another big rabbit hole that maybe nobody wants to.
The instant warp off seems weirder to me than the finding. We knew he finds the K162s, but
yeah, the K162 thing I knew was something that happens every now and then. But yeah, the instant warp off I've never had that before, and it was just that one site. Then we did some raiding in the C6 and that like the other day, like after that incident, and yeah, everything worked as intended. The boss stayed there until he gets down to X amount of armor, and you tackle him and blah blah blah. But yeah, that was one occasion that was very interesting.
This NPC is really funny. I was talking to some of the folks who originally made the wormhole stuff, and they describe him as like an actual crazy Frankenstein, where they were kind of testing the limits of the AI system, and they don't know, like that was more the point of him existing than a specific gameplay goal, I guess. And
yeah, we picked up on that. We got that.
They're like, he's just crazy. Just do whatever you want with him. He's totally Frankenstein. So we just added to it, I guess. We'll see where he ends up.
So how are the goals being met for the changes? Is it too early to tell? It must be.
Yeah, I think it's a little too early to tell, especially considering a lot of this stuff needs follow up, obviously. Like I said, I mean, the indications are fine. I was hoping to see more PvP kills, both because of the event being there with loot drop and because of the increased connections. I think right now there is increase, but not like super substantial increase. And then the other goals are getting hit pretty well, like the number of the drifter guy getting killed per day is definitely down a lot without the Esters farming. The amount of activity in wormholes is up a bit, just from the attention to it and increased connection. So that's all good. But I think it'll take more time for us to know how more of the PvP side and the general PvE risk or general PvE activity side, because of the increased connectivity, is affected. So yeah, it'll be a little bit.
Anecdotally, we heard that blue loot sales are down a little bit softer, but those have they take longer to realize, because whatever you farmed 7 days ago, you might still have. So it'll take a while.
So this might be more, I don't know about others, but because of the huge amount of C6 roaming, I've just not really PvE'd this week when I had plans to. So I think a lot of people may be in the same boat as me, where they're just taking the week off to let the craziness calm down, and then to work out where they are and if they need to make any changes. So it's definitely too early to make any assumptions about PvE increasing or decreasing.
Well, we'll check it out.
Makes sense.
I guess it's kind of like that RNGesus again, because we were ratting in our C6 just yesterday. We're like, you make enough ISK in wormhole space that if someone finds you and they catch it, bad luck, crap happens.
Well, there were some, I mean, I won't go into it, but there were some complaints from nullsec groups that, wormholers are too rich. So maybe that gets curbed a bit. Who knows?
Hey, keep nerfing nullsec and keep buffing wormholes. Bring more people in.
I mean,
we need more groups to come in.
Me and Colby have all this ISK because we don't buy Titans and we don't buy Titan pilots. It's as simple as that. Like, we have all these expensive dreadnoughts because we buy them instead of Titans. We're not any richer than nullsec players. Just don't have Titans.
Yeah. Interesting point.
Bling out the behemoths and the caimans and crap.
So another thing that dropped is Guardians Gala. That's an event that happens around February, Valentine's Day, basically. And you can see that some of the themes around it are like the skins are decorative in pink, which is very unusual for EVE Online. But there's something about Guardians Gala I'm drawn to. I don't know why. We're going to do a special program on it with Ashtarothi and some other people and talk about Guardians Gala specifically. But for now, I think what you should know is there is loot drops in nullsec that are higher than normal, or if you kill somebody, you get more of their stuff than usual. And
in Wormholes, not nullsec.
In Wormholes, right? Sorry, in Wormholes, and also Guardians Gala is mostly in Wormholes. You said that was surprised me.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to check on that. Like I said, this is Team Raw stuff, but
All right.
Yeah,
It is in HiSec and that too.
yeah, it's everywhere. I thought that it was going to be
Wormholes a
yeah.
bit harder.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's just everywhere.
Okay, so it's not specific to Wormholes. All right,
No,
so
no.
that's okay. And the thing that I had that because I wanted to get involved in Guardians Gala, and it was hard for me to find. Is that just something that you want? Is it because new players really aren't made for this kind of event, that it's not right there on the agency or popping up every time you log in?
I don't actually know. I'm guessing that. I don't know. I don't know if that was an intentional decision by the team put it in, or if it was just something they didn't have time for or didn't get to. I mean, the amount of this kind of content we're doing is a lot faster, and they might be just cutting out pieces, like adding to the agency for saving time. I'm not sure though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, we'll figure out what team that is and write them and let them know. We need better on-ramps to get involved in this kind of stuff. I guess you can just go out and find it. Other people are not having a problem, but for the casual players. Guardians Gala.
Okay, your mic's acting up a little bit now, Matterall, so I'm going to take over for a few minutes.
Okay.
All right, let's also mention another change that came in the patch this time, which is that some of the newer implants, well, actually, the amulet implant is not new. It just is renamed. It used to be called slave implants. The amulet was moved to a loyalty point store, and then I think that was the Blood Raiders, and then the new Nirvana implants, sometimes called Shield Slaves, got moved to the Sancha loyalty point store. Did I get that right?
Yep, you did.
Okay. So that was one thing. Oh, and we had some more tiericide happening on, which is our internal EVE community slang for taking a set of related modules and making sense out of them, but making them the variations between them, then the trade-offs for perhaps maybe less CPU cost or less capacitor cost or something like that, have to make them all make sense next to each other and have a reason for having each different version. We did capacitor transfers this time. By the way, that's Team Talos, isn't it?
Yeah, we have sort of a intern designer who's was working with us and probably will continue to work with us, who's picked up this tiericide stuff, which is awesome. And yeah, so it is technically our team. It's not me, but it's from Talos.
You just made a lot of people very jealous in the back in Fleet Chat, or in Talking Stations chat right now, by saying, design intern making changes to. Yeah, that's fantastic. Love it. So how many people are on Team Talos these days?
It's 4 of us: master plan, me, QA and producer, and then the fella doing the tier side is like half design time, half GM time. So he's like half on our team and half. So we're like 4.5 people basically.
Fantastic. Okay, question from the Talking in Stations live stream chat. They want to know if you're actively touching, looking at, or tweaking capitals at all yet.
Yeah, I've been messing with capitals like every other release for a year and a half or something.
Sweet.
But I'm gonna there's more on the way, for sure. I imagine we'll be working on capitals forever, actually. So
Probably.
but actually, there is going to be a pretty substantial change in the next Talos release, which is like less than 2 weeks away now, and then I think more coming after that. We talked about during the announcement of Nirvana implants that we had a tough time deciding how to do the Nirvana implant stuff relative to how capital balance is right now. Capital HP and survivability is a part of what is problematic about capitals. Obviously, Nirvanas make that worse. So we were trying to decide what order to do things, and went with the implants first, and then we want to follow up with changes to capital survivability. So that's one chunk that's coming sometime in the near future. I can't say exactly what form it will take, but there'll be some changes there, and then we want to keep trying to push capitals towards more specific roles and make more space for subcapitals kind of in the large fleet meta. So there'll be some more changes relative to that, to application to subcaps from supers and titans.
Yeah, I don't know what that person's looking for, like a giant dedicated expansion on capital nerfing or buffing, because it's clear they've been working on capitals.
Yeah, I mean, I can, we've actually talked a lot about what the best approach is for this, and what we settled on for now, at least, is that we've sort of made a roadmap for things more like this Wormhole release, like thematic, fun upgrade releases that are easy to, put into our marketing stuff, easy to kind of get excited about, and then do health changes along the way the whole time as well. So rather than like capital expansion where we totally screw over titans, we're gonna just do fun Wormhole release, fun faction warfare release, fun whatever, there's so much we can do, and then just have health changes, whether it's to structures or capitals or whatever, kind of layered on top of all that the whole time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've done some stuff here that's going to affect capitals, and we'll get to that in just a second. And you've done some mineral redistribution stuff that you're starting on. That's a big deal, I think, for capitals. You also did module tier side for cap transfers, but that's actually just is that going to affect all?
Most modules that went in for capitals in Citadel are already set up in the structure that tier side follows. So like with the cap transfer stuff, it was actually making subcap cap transfers look more similar to how the capital variations look, because those were already set up with the Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's other implants. The savior implants are just for subcapital rep time, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's get to this gorilla in the room too. Not just the red dot, but these mineral changes are a pretty big deal. I know this is not necessarily you, but you're there at CCP. Can you tell us something about those mineral changes? What you had in mind?
So that's not Talos. So
first thing.
So leave me out of it a little bit in a way. What I can say is that there's, so we have an ecosystem segment established now, which is really focused on trying to look at foundational stuff like resource distribution, sort of class and role design across ships and modules. It's including a lot of the balance type work that we've had ongoing in the past, but trying to pull back and like really look at foundational pieces of it and make changes to them if we can. And I can say that with the resource stuff, the number one goal is just to try and establish more control and understanding from our side. It's been quite a while since there was really deep work on resource distribution, and I think the guys in ecosystem that are looking at this are just really interested in trying to kind of reclaim the design for core things like harvesting, ratting, building, all of this, and just kind of get it back under a plan, under an organization that we feel like we understand and control. And I think some of the first steps at doing that are going to be pretty harsh and extreme, but that's what it's going to take sort of to get to a point where they feel comfortable working on it from a kind of knowledgeable place where, you know, they have the right levers to do what they need to do.
So to use an analogy, have they just sent the movie stars who need to lose a lot of weight to a special camp for a couple weeks?
The fat farm.
Is that what they're doing to us?
I mean, I don't think, first of all, I don't want to use any metaphor about people being fat, so I'm going to try and avoid that.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
No, I mean, I just, I'll say something stupid, I'm sure. But rather than sending them there, I think it's more about just building the camp or something like that. It's about, you know what I mean? It's about like setting up the structure to start figuring out what healthy looks like rather than already knowing what it is. I don't think there's there are indicators in the ecosystem now, obviously, of unhealthy things, massive stockpiles building, risk reward stuff being out of whack in several different places. But I think that this work is more about creating a structure where we can make changes we understand, rather than saying, now everybody be healthy. It may be that this is unhealthy too, and we need to move back to some middle ground, but they want to do it from a place of understanding where we are more, I don't know, more thoroughly, or yeah. But that's also a lot of speaking for them when it's not not actually me doing the stuff, so I should probably not try and go too deep, but that's my
Yeah, we heard from CCP Ratati, and he's now in charge of we imagine the ecosystem or econ system, which encompasses all this stuff, including, I think, does it also include Talos's purview? Like,
yeah, we're overlapped a lot between ecosystem and content. So there's kind of two segments. Well, there's three segments in dev now that kind of carried gameplay, ecosystem segment, and experience, like player experience. And because of the work, like with this Wormhole release, it's very much lined up with stuff Team Raw is doing under content. So we have a lot of interests there. We are technically under ecosystem, and so at the same time, we'll be picking up objectives from ecosystem as a segment, as well as just being mindful of the broader strategy ecosystem setting when we're doing things like balance changes. So like if we're going to work on caps, that's part of a big conversation in ecosystem, which we're under.
Got it. All right. Well, and that's a new position for him, it turns out. I don't know if you can speak to that or not.
I probably shouldn't. I don't know what talking about CCP positions and stuff. I don't know. You can get Hilmar on to talk about it or something.
All right.
Or get the man himself in that case.
Yeah, we'll try to get him on. Also want to talk to Muppet Hunter. You're familiar with him, right?
Yep. He's my buddy.
All right, cool. You like him? You want to comment?
He's great. I like everybody.
We know you do. Everybody likes you too. One thing I wanted to go back to implants a second. Those shield implants are kind of mighty.
Yeah, I mean, they're the same strength as the armor ones. And
but the theoretical stuff that people are putting together is an astounding amount of effective hit points with those shield implants.
Yeah, it's possible that there's some issues with capitals. And also, I mean, that, what you can do with infinite money in a perfect situation in Python doesn't mean that there's real practical implications that are as extreme as what people, were like the perfect Komodo fits for shield HP on Reddit are not going to be a reality in almost all situations ever in EVE, but they're definitely very good.
Yeah. So is that a situation where you're like, because I know you've done this, you did it with the Sveeple and you did it with, the Rorqual, I guess. You guys kind of put something out there and let it have its OP glory days for a little while before you nerf it back.
I mean, I don't have plans. I don't know of any plans to nerf the Nirvanas themselves. I did in this case, like, we decided that, like, basically that it would feel better this order, that having some glory days for shield stuff under Nirvanas, and then bringing the whole kind of system of HP and survivability down to a better place would feel better than nerfing HP and then giving the implants as like a olive branch afterwards. I think either one probably would have been fine, but this is just what we went with. I don't mind a little time in the sun, especially because the distribution is pretty conservative. Like our the event loot distribution in Dragonar Blitz, like you have on the screen, was pretty conservative, so there wasn't a whole bunch of people able to be running like, you know, big Nirvana cat fleets right away. And then the prices we put on the implants, at least as it stands now, are higher than they are on amulets because they use blueprints. So you have to build them as well as pay the LP. They might even be too expensive. I see you complaining about that, Dunk. But you know, time in the sun is easy to afford because there's no stockpile, so there isn't actually huge access to them anyway to begin with.
Well, I've heard there's a little bit of a stockpile because people have been farming.
Yeah, I'm sure
LP.
it's getting there by now. But
Yeah,
you know, having a month or two between their release and changes to capital HP is seems pretty easy to afford when that stockpile has to get built during that time.
yeah. All right, so CCPers can now play EVE Online openly. Have you been taking advantage of that?
No, I kept playing secretly. I was really excited about it, and then I was overwhelmed by all the invites. You know, everybody campaigned really hard to accumulate CCPers and get them into.
Can I throw you another one? I've not invited you yet. I've invited Matt.
Yeah, you haven't.
There's another open invite to any CCP to Hard Knock.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so I kept playing secretly, but I think that I think I decided actually like this week that apparently I'm allowed to actually take Kill 2 back, and just play with that name. So I might just do that and then not join anyone, but just tag along for stuff all the time. It seems pretty easy to, you know, hop into fleets from different groups, and so maybe I'll do some of that for fun, and then keep a secret character for my actual play, or not actual, but you know,
right,
normal.
It's tough being famous. It must be for you. So you guys, CCPers getting invites all over the place. Some people are taking advantage of them. We know. Oh God, well.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people are taking advantage. I know one of the most excited ones was a former Rooks and Kings guy. He was really pumped. I think he's playing under his old character now. I think CCP Convict has some characters he's been playing with, playing publicly with folks. So I know some people are definitely taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I think Burger is playing with Ashtarothi in his.
Oh yeah, I saw that on stream.
Yeah, his group. That's pretty cool. All right, but you're still undercover. But you might have Kill 2. You might see Kill 2 out there killing some guys.
We'll see. Hasn't happened yet, but I think I'll do that.
Are you gonna do it on stream if you do it, or any?
I mean, maybe do some.
For those that don't know, Rise was actually, I guess it was pre-streaming, right? When he would record and then put on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, streaming was just getting started about the time I got hired. Like Twitch was just becoming a thing. So most of my days were on YouTube, and before that, hosting big 2 gig AVI files on EVE files on Kriba service, and having to manually like download them one by one for content in the old days.
What's really cool about that, and people should know this, I think it's called Eve-Files. That's still up, so you can get some stuff from like 2008 that was recorded and then put up because there was no streaming at the time.
Yeah, there's still tons of old videos and screenshots on there from way back.
Yeah, that is an amazing archive of like EVE history if you wanted to really dig in.
It's still there, right? Hasn't gone down?
Yeah, it's still there. I regularly research in it. Like I'll go and try to figure
Nice.
out, the actual story, not people's memories of it and stuff. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, there it is. Cool.
Your stuff's all still there too. So if you want to see what he was like before he worked for CCP, you can check it out. All right. Thanks, man. I wanted to say this is like, again, this has been a revelation as far as like how wormholes are affected. And I think a lot of the, I guess, the effects are going to be seen in the days to come.
It's so funny talking about wormholes around wormholers. Like, this happened at CCP too when Izuki was there, presenting a lot of stuff about wormholes to folks around the company, engineers and other people. Like, people are like, wow, is this a revelation? I can't believe how all this stuff works. And wormholers are like, Jesus, like this is our life every day. What are you talking about?
We lose perspective a lot because we forget that the higher tier wormhole corps are sort of the same as the higher tier nullsecs, where we see your IP address on our TeamSpeak, we're like, yeah, this guy's probably a CCP dev. So yeah, we lose perspective sometimes. But a lot of what I've said here might have come across as negative, but to be fair, comparing this to the last time wormholes were majorly touched on, which was the PvE changes back in May 2016, I'm one of the more negative ones, and I have mostly positive things to say besides the sheer amount of roaming connections, which you've already said is going to be addressed. It's a pretty good one, honestly. I don't really have that much to complain about besides the quantities.
It's just nice to have things shaken up a little bit.
Yeah.
Sort of get stagnant after a while.
Yeah, and I mean that's this in a way journey began with Hilmar sitting in a hot tub in Finland and hearing that wormholes had gotten a little too stagnant, and he got excited about that and was like, please do wormhole chaos. And it's not the only thing that got us here, but that was part of it, part of the story.
I'm glad he let Izuki guide him for the record, because I heard him express some ideas at FanFest at home that he's not expressed since, because I think Izuki has talked him out of some of the worst ones. So credit where credit's due.
Yeah, for sure. Izuki's put in a lot of work. I really appreciate. Like, I'm sure he's not like the perfect bulletproof. Everyone agrees with him from wormhole space, but the amount of work he's done to try and translate how things actually work for folks at the high end in wormholes has been super helpful for everyone.
Absolutely, so yeah. Speaking as one of the leaders of a group who historically hates his group, I think he's done a very good job. I'd be voting for him again if he ran again.
Yikes. Well, I've seen a lot of calls for you to run for CSM, Loroseco.
I will not run against Izuki because I think he's doing a fine job. And if I do perform better than he does, it won't be by much. I honestly don't think I'd do as good a job as he does. So if he's running again next year, I won't be anywhere near it. If he decides to step down, I will consider it. But I will not run against him.
Check that out.
There you go.
Wisdom.
A couple more wormhole things. One is somebody wanted to know, this guy from Inner Hell says, asset delivery from reinforced structure. Why is that possible? I imagine in wormhole space he's talking about.
Oh, this is the act of when your structure's about to die and you know there's no chance of saving your assets, you'll deliver all of your stuff to, say, CCP Falcon. And then when the structure dies and all these ships pop out, when somebody comes along and kills them, they come up on CCP Falcon's killboard. And it's this way of trolling each other by sending each other ships and polluting their killboards. That's what he's referring to there.
Wow. That's nuts. The other thing is the C5, in wormhole space, when you use a dreadnought and you run it through a wormhole to kind of close it or to roll it, you're only 5K away from the actual wormhole. You should be 15K so that it's a struggle to get back to it. So it's a slower process. I think that's a bug.
It is a bug, yeah. We've come across that a few times. I believe it's on CCP's radar from what Izuki's told me.
Okay, so that'll probably get fixed sometime soon. If you use a carrier,
Did that just change, like with this patch?
Well, no. It's a while. I can PM you the details after if you like.
Okay, yeah, that's probably better.
But you're meant to spawn 15 to 17k off-ish, give or take, with a carrier or a dreadnought. And recently you've been spawning within jump range of the wormhole sometimes, under some circumstances, and you've been able to jump back and immediately roll it, which is definitely not intended, but it's...
I bet I know why this changed.
Yeah.
It's CCP Signal's fault. I just realized.
You have a name to blame, but no.
Yeah.
I've
believe
spoken
it's
to
more of a
Zuki about
dread
this, and he says it's unintended. So
It's more of a dread thing than a carrier thing, I think.
Yeah, Exuki says here they fixed carriers but forgot dread, so that'll probably get fixed soon. A little less safe in wormhole space.
I do think rolling should be easy, but it shouldn't be as safe as it currently is. It should. I like the fact that it's very easy to roll a connection and get a new one, but the fact that if you see someone do it, it's very hard to kill them while they're doing it if they're using a cap, because caps are very fast and heavy and can be hard to pump if you're not landing immediately. There might be some room for adding some danger there to rolling itself, but making it harder definitely shouldn't happen.
It's almost impossible to catch a capital unless you're already on the hole.
Yeah,
when it comes through, almost. Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally impossible, pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, there should be some more danger there.
All right. Well, this is kind of the last question for Rise, and it's kind of a bigger question, but it seems like there have been some discussions about over a long period of time that there's too much space in EVE. You want to have people colliding with each other more often. And it seems like this patch for Wormholes is kind of the same thing. It's trying to get people to mix it up more often because there's just too much empty systems when you're trying to find something to do. Can you talk about that a little bit as a general theme? Is that something that you look at or hear about?
I mean, that's a big question. I would say the simple part of it is that we definitely want to make it easier for people to get connected to each other, especially when that's what they want. The winter filaments were another example of that, of trying to find a way to maintain the integrity of the universe, but also make it easy for people to get to other people for content more quickly, since that's such a huge barrier. Personally, I'm a bit skeptical about the idea that the literal size of the universe is the thing that matters when it comes to people connecting. We could have a universe with, 20,000 systems, but if all the stuff that you needed was in one, then that's where everybody would be. Like I guess the size of space is one part of what leads to kind of density and connectivity, but it's not the only thing. And so I don't know. To me, it seems completely worthwhile to add space if we think that's going to increase interaction for some reason, which could be totally possible. We could have, a small region that had something extremely valuable, and I think that would lead to more people running into each other and fighting, even though it's extra space. But I think that the reason it comes up a lot, and something that we are focused on or thinking about a lot right now, is that there, the distribution of players is it feels, what's the word? Like, people are very spread out. It feels often that it's very hard to find other people to fight or to interact with, especially in Null, especially in Wormholes. So that's something we need to deal with. I think that's partly about how objectives to fight over are designed. It's part about travel design. It's part about the space itself. There's a bunch of elements that contribute to like how people are distributed across space and how close they feel to other players. And it's no doubt that I think generally in EVE right now, people wish that content was closer, that they could, find a fight more quickly, find someone to mess with more easily. And so that's where you get the winter filaments, which we're not done with. And that's where you get added wormhole connections. And there's more we can do for sure.
Yeah. Can you tell us anything about those winter filaments and where they might be seen again? Are you toying with some ideas on how to play with those? And we should say what those do, where it's a filament where you and your group get teleported basically to some random place, and then you find your way back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were awesome. Everybody really, I've never done something with so much positive feedback, so that was really exciting. And we did a little bit of analysis since the release, and the actual number of kills in nullsec during the time the winter event was active went up 26%. So it wasn't just kind of anecdotal. There was real change in the amount of activity in PvP and roaming activity in null, so that's super exciting. So we're probably gonna do something else with those soon.
Wild. So success all around.
Yeah, I mean, seems like it. I think it's a, if there was a negative side, it's that instant travel of any kind is a really slippery slope. And I think we need to be pretty careful about that. If we start reinforcing the expectation that we teleport you to the content you want, that could be an issue really quickly. But the trade-off of not knowing where you're going is really important. We're not sending you to the content you want. We're sending you to who knows where. And I think that makes it... What's that?
So for the record, I really like these filaments, but a negative that came up while we were discussing them in the corp is that when you set yourself up in a very safe space and surround yourselves with blues, one of the downsides of doing that is content's a very long way away. And these filaments remove that downside of mass going up a bunch of your friends.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Such a good point. So they're having their cake and eating it too.
The downside for big groups with filaments is that often you just get moved to blue space. And I heard a lot of frustration. People would use them at like the active system ones. Goons use them. They land in Delve right next to their stuff. And then they have to wait 15 minutes to try again. And they're annoyed. It's like, well, brought that on yourself a little bit.
I got another downside, and that is I couldn't slap away the invites to fleets fast enough.
I mean, I was the most exciting thing to me is it seemed like it really showed that people want to be, I mean, this is obvious, but having some real reinforcement for it was really good. Some real validation. People want to be in these small fleets, roaming for smaller scale fights. Like, people love that. And the fact that there was enough activity with filaments that these small fleets were actually running into each other and giving content to people that were usually not getting a lot of visitors, like all of it is really, really positive. So hopefully we can take learnings from that and do more things along this line. But the filaments themselves obviously were just really good for the game from everything we can see. So
yeah, well, I meant it as a bad thing because the byproduct is people would get kidnapped. They'd accidentally say, "Yeah, I'll be in your fleet," and then they would get teleported off to some place and killed.
That's fine.
I know, I'm kidding. Another thing the last time we had you on, we were talking about Sino changes. Can you talk a little bit about how that went? What's your perspective on it now?
I mean, mostly positive. I don't think that's a system we're done with. I think it still feels kind of bizarre and frustrating that the fastest way to respond to something happening in your space is with the biggest ships in the game. Sino changes change that dynamic. I think there's more depth there now. There's more room for hunters, but it also created some issues. I know that moving things around for smaller groups that don't have the ability to support as many alts and support as many like throwaway recons that are expensive has been frustrating. So I mean, I think it was good, but I don't think we're done. I think there's
I can say for the record, as one of the groups who thought they'd be frustrated by the disposable recon issues and having to inject up a bunch of new alts, it's not been as bad as I thought it would be. It's like the advantages have way outweighed the disadvantages of the whole recon things. Coming from somebody like I've never got more than 5 supercaps in the sorts of fleets that I run in, and coming from one of those people, it's a lot more good than bad.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, I definitely hasn't been negative enough for those groups that I've, heard over like much noise about frustration. But like specifically in Vegas, when I was just talking to people who weren't so mad that they were like, campaigning online to get it changed, but I was just talking to normal people on the floor. Several of them said this was an issue that they were having a hard time coping. That was still sort of during, a lot closer to the transition to that system. So I don't know how they're coping now, but
yeah, it's been difficult, but definitely not as bad as we predicted it would be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Last thing, this is something that has to do with the moon mining. The moon mining changes that are coming. How is Wormhole space affected by these mineral changes?
Don't know. No idea.
All right, we'll have to get Ratati in here to see what that is.
Yep.
Because there's like no information on it, but it does figure in heavily on like where you can get some of these minerals that are missing. But Okay.
Yeah, have to have those eco guys around.
Okay, so Rise, thanks for spending so much time with us answering all these questions. We're going to shift over to news real quick with Carneros. What's out there?
Thank you. Well, halfway through today's show, there was an announcement that I feel like the audience might find interesting. As you know, there's a conflict happening in the north between Dead Coalition and NC. PanFam Fraternity and some others, and then Dead Coalition has a little support from the Imperium. There was an announcement today that Ranger Regiment has shifted sides and has moved down to Delve and officially joined the Imperium. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as a news item for y'all to digest and think about for next time.
Yeah, I think that happened last night, and even Sort had no idea that it was happening, if true. He was like, this is the first I've heard of it. And even people in the Imperium were like, well, they're not blue yet. So like TIS Discord heard right away that Ranger Regiment's leaving Dead Coalition and going to Imperium. That's a big deal.
Well, I can't speak to their internal communications on their side. I don't know.
Yeah, I heard about that earlier, and they are blue to goons now.
Also, at this very moment, I think there's an eviction happening for, who is it who's being evicted?
Inner Hell's evicting Is It Really Us?
And Is It Really Us has a lot of friends trying to help them out. Is there a result yet for that eviction?
I believe a Fortizar has just died, but the main staging structures, I believe, are still standing. I've not been watching killboards because I've been on here, but I think the fight is still ongoing. It's still up in the air.
Yeah, there is. The Fortizar just died, and a bunch of ships have currently died and are currently dying.
Do you know, Colby, whether this is just like the loot from the Fortizar or whether there are forces actually engaged?
I believe it's loot from the Fortizar at the moment. Even a goon shuttle has died. It's just loot from the fort.
Yeah, so that'll be fort loot.
Yeah.
So it sounds like
it's random stuff.
It sounds like the Defender's final stand is yet to come, and that'll be something to watch out for later this evening.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. I think that's all we have for news. Anything else, Carneros?
That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, cool. For more, check out EVE Online, or today in EVE Online, which happens every morning. And then check out our Wednesday show, and then again on the Sunday show for the bigger news items. I want to say thanks to Loroseco and Colby, and of course CCP Rise for coming in and talking to us about this crazy big new patch. We're going to hop into public channel and answer some more questions. If you guys want, you can join us there on TIS Discord. Thanks, Carneros, for helping me out, and McLeod, our engineer. Thank you very much for all your work. Any last thoughts, guys?
Can I thank CCP Rise for making me 2.5 bill this morning from that extra loot drop thing in Wormholes? I killed a 3 bill MTU, got a 2.5 bill loot drop.
Yes, you're welcome. It was me personally that did it. You're welcome.
That is my 1 month subscription sorted. Much appreciated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Loot Fairy. This is what he looks like. All right.
It's actually Team Raw, not me, but I'll pass along. I'm glad it's glad it's fun.
Good. I like it.
All right.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was great to be a part of some of the talks about this stuff and to share some experiences.
You can finally go to sleep, Mr. Australian time zone.
It's only 4:45 in the morning.
Whoa.
All right. Okay, thanks very much, Rise. Really appreciate it. And thank you for watching Talking in Stations. That's all we've got this week. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.